Welcome to Municipal Affairs. Today we're talking about a turning point, a pivotal moment for Canada's economy and for the communities that sustain it, especially those often working behind the scenes. Rural Canada. Now, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities released The Future of Rural Canada, a roadmap that calls on all levels of government to recognize something we've all known, but often overlook. Rural Canada is not just part of the story, it is the story. As global uncertainty continues to shift economic priorities, rural leaders aren't waiting on the sidelines. They're stepping up with solutions to diversify trade, invest in critical infrastructure, and build a more inclusive, future ready economy that benefits every single Canadian from coast to coast to coast. But here's the truth: rural potential doesn't unlock itself. It takes a modern partnership, one rooted in real results, modern tools, and mutual respect. Because when rural communities thrive, the entire country moves forward. Now, to help tackle this report, we are honored to be sitting down with Neil Como, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Rural Forum Chair and Councillor for Sturgeon County, Alberta. Together, we'll explore what it takes to bring this vision to life and why now is the moment to act. So let's dive in. Councillor Como, thank you so much for sitting down with me and chatting about the most recent FCM, well, the first FCM rural report in almost, I believe, 7 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Why is it important to launch the new report here in Ottawa at this year's convention?
Well, I think there's no better place, truly, when we can impact and have direct contact in with the new government that's in play in Ottawa today. What a better place to launch it than there. I mean, yes, if we could have launched it in rural Manitoba, rural Saskatchewan, that would be great, but I think this is where we're going to hopefully see the most voices and tables that it's going to be at, and the most response and views, hopefully.
So what's the key takeaway from the report that you want rural members, particularly rural members, to understand that FCM is hearing them?
Well, I mean, that's been a work in progress for sure. It's something that we've even noticed comparing last year's convention to this convention, the amount of rural content. And the focus on rural is really paramount this year in showing the rest of Canada that we're listening. FCM is listening, and they understand that rural maybe at times has kind of been left behind. It's time to get back at the front table and lead the way and charge the way. And you know, we as rural members, we know what we provide to the rest of Canada. We just need to show that, and people have to hear that and understand that.
What does that mean, though?
Because when I say what we provide to Canada, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the simple thing, like, and I mentioned earlier to yourself and others, the GDP that rural Canada provides, 25% of the GDP of Canada comes out of rural. I'll use Alberta. Alberta is the 5th largest GDP in all of Canada. That's rural Alberta. So it just shows what we have to provide back to the country and how we're supporting the country and how we're helping build and create a new Canada moving forward. And not that the Canada's changing, but just the dynamics. I mean, we've been in flux here now for, I'll say, the last 5-6 years at least. And definitely now with the situation south of the border, that's another impact that we've got that we've never really faced before. And we have to learn to pivot and be ready to move on a dime. And that's what we're doing right now.
There's some concern that, and I mentioned it in my question to yourself and President Bly at the press conference this morning, that FCM hasn't taken rural concerns to heart as much as they should have in the past. Is this too little too late, or do you think this is a good opening sort of ask for rural municipal leaders to take a second chance on FCM?
Well, I think if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu. So rural Canada has to realize we need a seat at the table. FCM has understood that changes have needed to be made, and we're making those changes. Are there more to come? Yes, I would hope so. You know, I would love to see the presence of rural be even stronger than it is right now. And moving forward, that's something that I commit to, but I think other members do. I mean, FCM's first vice president, Tim Tierney, grew up rurally, so he understands it. He may live in Ottawa, but he understands it. You have Kathy Valentino, second vice chair. She lives up in a very rural area and is very impacted by situations that, you know, across Canada right now we're all facing. Alberta, BC, and Saskatchewan, or not, Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan are all under threat right now from the fires that are going on, and it's the rural centers that are affected. It's not downtown, Regina or Winnipeg. it's rural Canada.
There's a lot of talk at this convention that this convention is a lot about rural priorities, which is good. Bail reform, environmental concerns with the raging wildfires that are going on. But some in Alberta might say, where's the oil and gas conversations? Where's that going on? As the Rural Forum Chair, what are you speaking at behind the scenes to FCM to ensure that oil and gas doesn't fall off the radar? Because it's very important to some reeves and councillors in your neck of the woods.
It's very important to myself. We have the industrial heartland, and oil and gas is very important there, the petchem industry. Energy that provides for the rest of Canada should be highlighted. FCM has supported in the past and continues to the corridor work. We know we need to still push the federal government to get pipelines going across this country. I'm going to use Bill Huber's words from earlier today where he said, if we can create better ports and better transit across this country via rail, etc., that'll take some of the pressures off the rest of the country, that we can maybe, you don't have such a backlog of the oil and gas having to be on rail. If it's in pipelines, now you can move grain around a little faster, and other commerce for that matter.
So you talked in your press conference that this is going to be a living document. It's not just going to sit on a shelf and everyone's going to read it once and that's it. What's the next steps now? Because this report has now been tabled, people are going to start reading it because it was just released today at noon as we're recording this. What do you hope is the next step?
Well, I think implementation and advocacy, and that's what we do best. Who knows our communities better than the people that live it and breathe it? And I'm going to use a Scott Pearce quote, government of proximity. We know what is happening. So we need to help show the rest of Canada that this implementation and this plan, which is a breathing document, and I think everything is, are there maybe some people that feel we didn't touch on everything? I had somebody approach me and say, you didn't touch enough about tourism. Right. I forgot to say that, to be quite honest. But I know that's important for rural Canada as well. And I know you've got a passion for tourism as well. Like, in Sturgeon County, all the golf courses, that's a big driver. That's an economic driver in our area for those golf courses and for recreation. So we need to keep promoting it. That's the biggest thing. And when we come back to Ottawa, or we're back in Alberta or Saskatchewan or Quebec, we need to promote that rural angle so that people know that how important rural is.
This year at the Rural Municipalities of Alberta Convention, there was a resolution that was put forward. You weren't there. You had to go off to Deval for the FCM convention, but that resolution failed, but barely failed at 3%. There might be rural municipal leaders who might be listening to this or watching this or hearing this right now. What is the benefit of rural Canada being part of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities?
You have an organization that's over 100 years old and has had the ear of whichever government of choice it would be, conservative, liberal. This organization not too many years ago was blamed for being too conservative. Now I think in Alberta, most people would say it's too liberal. But that's who we have to speak with. They're the government in power in place right now. So you have to play with who your partner is at the time. That doesn't mean that we don't talk to the opposition parties, because we do, whether it be right now the Bloc, the NDP, and the Conservatives. We're going to continue to talk to them as well. They're going to help us as well. Someone like Elizabeth May, the Green Party, has one seat. Elizabeth May, every time I see her, says, if you need something brought across the floor to the Liberals, you call me, I'll bring it across the floor and get it for you. So that help from the opposition is what we have to focus on as well as the government that's in power right now. And they don't have a majority, so they need to learn to work well with their neighbors across the hall, as well as the municipalities that, again, we know what's going on in our communities.
Are you optimistic about the future of rural Canada?
I am. I think if I wasn't, I don't know if I would sit in this chair, to be quite honest. I think that rural Canada has changed, and not a lot of people like change for the most part. And it's still evolving. And I look at, I'm going to use my kids as an example. They're sixth generation, I should say, in the area where I live. They want to stay there. They love rural Canada. They want to be the next leaders of rural Canada. And will they sit in this chair someday? Hopefully, maybe not. But at the same point in time, rural Canada is thriving. We just need to learn how to pivot and change and evolve as the rest of Canada is.
Before I let you go, what's the one thing that you hope people, rural municipal leaders particularly, take from this report that you and I have not chatted about?
I think the one thing I hope, if they have any questions, contact me. Contact anyone at FCM and we will help you along the way with whatever concerns you're having. I think that's a big thing that's been failing, and I'm going to take responsibility for that at times too, is our messaging hasn't always been the best. And I think we need a better communication plan, and that starts with me, and it works its way up from there. I go back to rural Alberta members. Again, I'm a phone call away. I can come and visit you for a coffee, whatever it may be, and help elevate your concerns, that we get them back to the Hill in Ottawa and we make changes that are better for Canada and better for rural Canada for that matter.
What does the rural media have to play, though? Because you mentioned in your press conference that if you were a big city mayor caucus, there'd be 12 different there would be 12 different media. And I'm going to admit that I'm part of the media, so I have a role to play in it as well. What can the media do to help promote rural issues on the national stage as well?
You know what? The more times that I can get in front of a camera, or anyone for that matter from FCM, to promote rural, and this report for that matter, is for the better. I know Big City Mayor's Chair Caucus, Josh Morgan, he has said anything you need to do, and if I need to help stand beside you and do a joint press conference, I'm all in. He understands it. He grew up, he has some rural background, as most of us do for that matter, and he gets it. So, the main thing is if we can get our voice out there, and I'm not going to stop. I love your program, but there's others out there that we need to get our voice heard. And, I'd love to say that, the next press conference we do, whether that's a month from now, a week from now, or a year from now, has more opportunity at that table. And that goes back to, I think, again, as an FCM member, maybe I need to do a little more legwork and try and push that out there with my local media, which then someone like yourself can push it up the chain of command.
Councillor Coma, always a pleasure to sit down with you. I feel like this is the first of many conversations we're going to have about this rural report, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
At a press conference last month, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities President, Rebecca Bly, spoke to reporters about why it was important to advocate for rural needs.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Merci de vous joindre à nous. Rural communities form the beating heart of this country. From coast to coast to coast, they cover more than 95% of Canada's landmass and are home to a growing population of 6.3 million people. While playing an essential part in our national identity in what makes Canada, Canada, our rural municipalities also play a huge role in the overall economic success of our nation. From the agricultural producers that feed our country and the world, to key resource industries that produce such vital outputs. FCM is keenly aware that rural municipal leaders are closely attuned to the pulse of their communities. Every day, these leaders are striving to make their municipalities great places to live. As they look ahead to the future, they envision prosperous, safe, and resilient local communities. And at a crucial time for Canada, as we recalibrate our national economy and our trading relations, it is more important than ever to strengthen our rural heartlands so we can realize that vision of a flourishing nation. But it is only through full partnership between all orders of government we can unleash the full economic potential of these communities. Rural Canada is at a critical moment. Specifically, rural communities are facing headwinds on key issues like infrastructure, connectivity, and public safety. Ultimately, the success of these communities rests on local leaders being empowered to deliver the infrastructure and services that are so badly needed. To fully realize that vision of a more prosperous, safe, and resilient rural Canada, we're advancing key recommendations that are based on the experiences of rural members. Ce sont des étapes nécessaires pour que cette vision d'un Canada royal plus prospère devienne une réalité.
Second Vice President for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Kathy Valentino, who also serves as the President of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities and Councillor for the City of Thompson, Manitoba, spoke to reporters at that same press conference about the needs of rural municipalities in this ever-changing economic landscape.
And like many rural communities across Canada, we are facing growing pressures on our emergency services. We're seeing longer 911 response times, the RCMP staffing shortages, in particular in Manitoba, we have the highest vacancy rate for RCMP. Some other places are having vacancy rates in their municipalities of as high as 50%. The challenges in rural Canada for these challenges are real and they are urgent right now. When we talk about bail, we look to implement evidence-based reforms. We have to stop, not reduce, we have to stop the repeat offending and expand judicial capacity while strengthening data sharing across jurisdictions. Municipalities like mine and Thompson, we are doing everything we can, but we cannot do it alone anymore. I have the highest crime severity index. The crime capital of Canada is in my municipality and the highest RCMP contract in the province of Manitoba, and we can't do it anymore. We can't do it alone, and we cannot have the downloaded costs for public safety anymore on our budget. We need stronger coordination, we need modern tools, and a renewed federal partnership to meet these demands head on. Public safety is a shared responsibility, and when rural communities have the support they need, they strengthen the safety and resilience of our entire country, most importantly our rural streets.
Also in attendance at that press conference was President of the Federation Québécoise de Municipalities, Jacques Demers, who spoke on behalf of rural municipalities in the province of Quebec.
Aujourd'hui, je prends la parole à titre de maire de Sainte-Catherine-d'Athlée et aussi comme président de la Fédération québécoise des municipalités. Un rapport de la FCM qui parle beaucoup. Il y a des chiffres dans ce rapport-là, il y a des choses qui nous ramènent vraiment à nos communautés rurales. Une de celles qui me frappe le plus, c'est quand on me dit 9 % des ménages ruraux vivent dans des logements inadéquats. Quand on sait qu'au niveau urbain, c'est 6 %, de voir que dans le milieu rural, on est à 9 %, c'est pour montrer à quel point c'est là qu'on le vit. Il n'y en a pas d'espace. Pourtant, des logements, il n'en existe pas dans le milieu rural. 1 % d'augmentation quand même de population dans ce milieu-là entre 2023 et 2024. On pourrait parler aussi de certaines communautés autochtones qui représentent 80 % des personnes en situation d'itinérance. On est en 2025, on parle encore de chiffres aussi grands. Qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire de ce côté-là? De quelle façon, collectivement, on va travailler pour améliorer ça? À Sainte-Catherine-d'Athlée, nous faisons tout ce qu'on pense, du moins à nos moyens, pour avancer. On travaille beaucoup dans la cohabitation, ça veut dire l'intergénérationnel, mais aussi ces bâtisses-là, une fois qu'ils sont munis d'un deuxième appartement, même les bâtisses, mais ça va rester des appartements qui vont être utilisés par la suite aussi. On travaille de ce dossier-là, entre autres, avec des étudiants de l'Université de Sherbrooke, tout près de chez nous. C'est pourquoi nous appuyons pleinement les recommandations de la FCM, mettre en place une stratégie coordonnée pour lutter contre l'itinérance rurale. On ne l'entend pas si souvent, ce mot-là, pourtant tellement important. Renforcer la collecte de données pour mieux comprendre. C'est la seule façon qu'on peut parler avec les gouvernements. Il faut parler avec des chiffres. Allons chercher les données. Soutenir les projets de logement communautaires et modulaires. Des solutions qui sont de plus en plus nécessaires et souples si on veut être rapide de ce côté-là pour répondre réellement aux besoins. À bâtir un partenariat national pour prospérer en ruralité, qui passe évidemment par éliminer des barrières qui sont évidentes, telles la TPS sur les nouvelles constructions. Il faut mieux uniformiser aussi probablement nos normes de construction, travailler plus ensemble, chaque palier de gouvernement. L'exemple de Sainte-Catherine-d'Athlée, ça montre qu'une petite municipalité rurale peut quand même innover, répondre à des besoins qui sont présents.
Grand Bay Westfield Mayor Brittany Merrifield, who also serves as the president of the Union Municipalities of New Brunswick, spoke at that same press conference, talking about the needs for connectivity being a big issue for rural municipalities.
And I'm here to highlight the urgent need for targeted investment in rural connectivity and infrastructure, challenges that FCM's new report lays out clearly. We're at a crossroads, but with the right leadership and the right investment, this is also a moment of opportunity. So let's start with broadband and cellular infrastructure. In a country as vast and as ambitious as Canada is, it's really staggering to consider that 21.8% of rural households still lack adequate internet. That's nearly 1 in 4 families trying to work, learn, access health care, or even make a simple phone call, stuck with download speeds of 20.9 megabits per second. That's less than half the national average. In plain terms, it's like trying to run a race with one shoe. So in Grand Bay, Westfield, and across the province of New Brunswick, we have cellular dead zones, places where a dropped call during an emergency could cost precious time. And that's not just frustrating, it's dangerous. In an emergency, a dropped call can mean a delayed response. It can mean the difference between help arriving on time or too late. Some families pay up to $200 a month for unreliable service. I mean, that's not acceptable. Access to affordable, reliable broadband is no longer optional. It's essential to public safety. It's essential to remote work, healthcare, education, and local business growth. And then there's the infrastructure in rural Canada. Rural municipalities, as you've heard here today, manage 36% of Canadian infrastructure, but face an over $1 billion backlog. Our roads, our bridges, our water and our wastewater systems are aging and under pressure as our populations grow. So nationally, almost 15% of rural water systems and nearly 1 in 5 rural roads are in poor condition. And these aren't abstract statistics. They're not just random numbers. They are the streets that we're driving, the pipes we rely on, and the systems we need to keep our communities safe and healthy. So you might ask, what's the path forward? Well, the report calls for clear action. Stable, long-term funding for broadband expansion, a dedicated rural infrastructure fund, and a national prosperity partnership to ensure that rural voices are at the table. With smart and targeted investment, rural communities from coast to coast to coast, including across my home province of New Brunswick, can lead the way in building a more resilient and prosperous Canada.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation and gained some valuable insights into the world of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the work that they are doing on behalf of municipalities from coast to coast to coast. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube or by visiting us online at crossborderinterviews.ca. Now, to learn more about the communities and the people that we feature on this show and our sister shows, the Cross Border Interviews and the Political Trenches Local Government Network, visit us online, as I said, at crossborderinterviews.ca. Now, your support means the world to us, so share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Now, this is our last episode before our summer hours kick in. During the month of July and August, we will be only going 1 day a week for Municipal Affairs. So tune in every Thursday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we can't wait to be bringing you brand new shows when we return in September as we head into the Calgary election, and we're going to be full force during that time, speaking to as many candidates as possible. So until then, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back shortly. Till then.